This is DawgNation Postgame, live from the UGA Bookstore in Athens. Brought to you by R.S. Andrews, Kroger, Pella Windows and Doors, Sir Chero's, Lassiter Tractor, White's Pools, Jittery Joe's Coffee, and the UGA Bookstore. Now here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into our DawgNation Postgame show. We're live here at the UGA Bookstore, where Georgia has gotten a 59-21 win over UMass here today. Obviously, a little bit of a tale of two sides of the ball for Georgia. Clearly pretty sharp offensively, picking up where they left off a week ago, playing their probably most complete offensive game of the season last week against Tennessee. Kind of a continuation of that today. Fast start by this Georgia offense, and a lot to celebrate on that side of the ball. Nate Frazier, the Georgia running back, becomes the first Georgia running back to exceed 100 yards rushing here this season. Carson Beck made a lot of sharp throws, so perhaps some things to like about the Georgia offense. Some young players get a chance to play. Flip side, though, certainly plenty to be concerned about when it comes to this Georgia defense. An extraordinarily lackluster effort for that group, giving up just huge yardage total today to UMass. We'll talk about that, but in our discussion today, I will also talk about why I think when it's all said and done, I'm not quite so sure how much all of this matters. It is certainly something to remark about, and obviously if you kind of lived through it, you're perhaps a little frustrated by some of that. That's not the brand of Georgia football that we love the most. But the honest truth is, I think within a couple of days, whatever happened today against UMass will be quickly forgotten, because it's what's ahead of Georgia, I believe, that becomes a lot more important here. Obviously, this upcoming Friday, the regular season finale, the game against Georgia Tech. But based on what we are already seeing play out in college football here today, maybe even more important for Georgia is what happened away from Georgia today. If you're not aware, maybe you're just walking out of the stadium, you haven't been looking at your phone. Florida has pulled an upset. They have beaten Ole Miss, giving Ole Miss its third loss of the season, perhaps knocking, we would think anyway, very likely that it's knocked Ole Miss out of the college football playoff. Indiana, which is also ranked ahead of Georgia this past week, they lose somewhat convincingly to Ohio State today. That was a team that was also ahead of Georgia. It looks like they could be moving down, which gives Georgia a chance to at least theoretically move up. So I think the biggest headline today for Georgia is perhaps not what it did in its own game, although there is certainly plenty to talk about from there, but maybe it is what happened on behalf of Georgia. Ole Miss losing, Indiana losing, I think greatly increases the likelihood that Georgia could be hosting a college football playoff game between the hedges in December, and that would obviously greatly aid any chance that Georgia has to advance in the playoffs, maybe make a run at the national championship in this new era in which somebody gets a chance to host. Georgia may be one of the four teams that gets a chance to do that based on the Ole Miss loss, based on the Indiana loss. Those, to me, are key takeaways here, that on a day when Georgia probably didn't play its best football game, it may have gotten some very good news. So if you want to react to this today, what you liked and didn't like about Georgia's performance, what you think about the playoff picture unfolding around Georgia with even more ranked teams playing tonight, and the chance for Georgia to even benefit more if, for instance, an Army were to upset Notre Dame. Or things of that nature. If you want to talk about all of that here this evening, we will give you your chance to do that. You can click the link to join us watching on Facebook or YouTube or at DawgNation.com. If you're walking out of the Georgia game, if you're leaving Sanford Stadium, stop by and see us here at the UGA Bookstore. We'll get you on the air. We'll give you a chance to share your thoughts. We will obviously look forward to a fun conversation here about everything about where things stand with Georgia, with now, believe it or not, just one regular season game left to go. So all of that is on the table live here from the UGA Bookstore and via our Zoom calls if you want to click that link. But in addition to that, you've obviously grown very, very comfortable hearing the voice of Davin Bellamy here on our DawgNation Postgame show. Davin weighing in on everything going on around Georgia football. So let's bring Davin in on that here for right now. And Davin, let me start with what happened here in Athens and sort of work our way out there for a moment. And obviously on the side of the ball that you certainly know the best, the side of the ball that you played so well at during your Georgia career, What did you make of the fact today that Georgia was just giving up just tons of rushing yardage, quarterback run, a couple of running backs who were having some success? What did you make of the fact that Georgia today was having so much trouble with this Minutemen offense, really getting a lot of success on the ground against UGA here today?
What's up, Brandon? How's it going, man? The first thing that I noticed was, usually when you have these two type of games, you have a Power 5 team going against, a lower, conference team, and usually that talent disparity is shown on the line of scrimmage, and usually your skilled players are pretty much, even. So we were just getting dominated up front, and we have the bigger players, we have the better players. So that's where I was kind of getting confused. Where are they motivated? Are they not looking or taking this team seriously? Because the trenches is something that the SEC should have total control over, playing the Division I AA program.
Yeah, this is one of those things where, I don't want to excuse this too much or give Georgia too much of a free pass or anything like that. But, Davin, I guess I do question the level of motivation today for Georgia coming off what has been such an intense grind. I mean, think about back-to-back weeks against Ole Miss and Tennessee, rivalry game against Florida, the game before that against Texas. Georgia has really been through it here over the course of this 2024 season. No one's more battle-tested this year than what Georgia has been. And I'm sorry, it is just human nature. And I'm not trying to make excuses for the bad defensive performance or anything like that. But it is just human nature to perhaps take your foot off the gas, maybe exhale a little bit after you've been through what you've been through. And for Georgia, maybe an example of that just finding the same level of focus for UMass today that they had the previous week against Tennessee. I mean, maybe it's just impossible here, or maybe if it's not impossible, maybe it is at least to be expected that there would be a little bit of a letdown. I mean, how much of this can be explained by the fact that Georgia has been through a grind, playing UMass as sort of a step outside of that grind, and maybe a little bit of a coming back down to earth was maybe to be expected from Georgia today?
Honestly, I don't care, and I'm pretty sure Coach Smart doesn't care about how tough the schedule's been. This is what you signed up for. When you committed to this school, you could have chose to play in any other conference. You're playing in the SEC. In order, the way to win the SEC is to stop the run. So just because you've had these tough games, that doesn't mean anything. When I've been in a Georgia's programming, when you sit in a team meeting, you want your yardage to be up under 3.2 yards to carry. That's if you're playing Alabama or if you're playing UMass. It's a standard that you have to play up to every week. There is no off week in the SEC. So you should already have that in your mind of taking this week by week. To be completely honest with you, well, kind of like I said before, the line of scrimmage, when you're playing a conference that's not to your standard and they paid you to play, the line of scrimmage is where the difference is. The outside is kind of where you can get some good wide receivers, some good DBs, but the interior should be clear as day, the dominant factor to the Power 5 conference that was paid to play. So I understand it's been a tough schedule, but this is what you signed up for, and it's going to get tougher as you can move forward. And when you allow this on tape, everyone sees it. So now you're going to go into every week where teams are going to try to pound the ball on you. So whatever you are on tape, that's what you are. There is no letdown.
You saw on the screen there a moment ago just how significant the issue was for Georgia, allowing 226 yards on the ground today, even more than they allowed against Alabama earlier this season. So a lot of folks want to weigh in on that and kind of what has been a very interesting day for Georgia and also around Georgia, with a couple of surprising results from the ranks of the playoff contenders here. Live at the UGA bookstore, though, we're going to hear from some Georgia fans. William Camacho's our buddy here on the scene right now. William, you hear Davin Bellamy there. A little critical of this Georgia defense. What did you make of the performance overall for UGA?
Another slow start to begin the game is like a tradition, but we should be fine as far as the rankings go. We need to be moved up. I mean, we put 59 points up. That should be good to get us up. And our defense played our normal mediocre. And that's pretty much it.
Well, William, thanks for coming by and being part of the show. Always appreciate Georgia fans weighing in on that. And how about that point, Davin, that even with some issues defensively, because of the Ole Miss loss, because of the Indiana loss, you're talking about the chance now that Georgia can move up in these playoff rankings. And that's not just a cosmetic thing right now. That also, as we get towards the end of the regular season, increases the likelihood that Georgia could be one of the 4 teams that get a chance to host a home playoff game. So, this is a day that can still have plenty of good news for Georgia, even though the UGA performance itself certainly was not a perfect game.
Oh, for sure. And I'm pretty sure, like we spoke about around 2-3 weeks ago when we first started talking about these rankings. And I mentioned as a player in the locker room or as a staff, you don't really look at those things because you understand things are going to change week by week. They don't hand championships out by being the number 1 team in the country week 7. They hand those out at the end of the season. So I think you're seeing that now. Teams are starting to play like, Indiana versus, Ohio State, and that's their first big wins. Big team playing, and they lost, by 2 possessions. So you're just starting to see how the cream is going to rise to the top. So you don't really worry about the rankings early in the season, and Georgia right now is rising to the top.
Hear from more Georgia fans on the scene here live at the UGA bookstore. Tell folks your name, what you thought about the game here today.
David Sharfstein's my name, and look, I wasn't looking to get on the show. I listen to this every week. I was just hoping to get a preview and listen to DawgNation every day. But look, the offense looked as good as you would expect against this level of competition. I know there's consternation around the defense, but look, we've got 6 days to prepare for Tech. I know Kirby's going to say all the right things about, oh, shucks, we respect UMass, but let's be honest, they were preparing for Tech this week. I absolutely believe that.
Well, listen, I appreciate you being on the show, and thank you for listening to DawgNation Daily, too. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Where do you live?
Alpharetta, Georgia.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, listen, thank you very much, and certainly hope you enjoy the rest of the season. And maybe next Friday night, big crowd here for Georgia Tech on hand. Pretty good stuff there. And Dav, we'll come back to you on that. A couple of things here. There's plenty to sort of question about the Georgia defense, but as our commenter points out there, it was a very sharp day for the Georgia offense. It seems like they did pick up big throws from Carson Beck, 100 yards rushing from Nate Frazier. It seems like that side of the ball kind of picked up where it left off a week ago, where it probably played its most complete game of the season against Tennessee. Obviously a much weaker opponent today, but a really sharp, mostly explosive day from the Georgia offense in a time when they probably had to have that. Otherwise, it's a lot more of a nail-biter in that stadium if the Georgia defense is struggling and if the offense is not picking them up. But clearly complimentary football today where the Georgia offense was able to give a boost to a Georgia defense that just had a hard time finding its footing for most of the day.
I definitely agree. Even though I'm very critical of the defense, sometimes you're going to have those games where the offense is going to have to pick you up, And I remember when we played in the Rose Bowl, and we just could not stop them. We couldn't. They were just getting anything they wanted, and our offense kept us in the game. So that's the silver lining that I took from this is, how poor our defense played. Our offense balanced that out and was able to just keep things moving. And I definitely think they're starting to find their tune. The running game is going. We're not in so many 3rd and longs. We're starting to understand that our missed message are going to be in the middle of the field using our tight ends, and we're going to set up our receivers for the deep shots with the play action. So I just think, last week game plan and the same game plan this week, taking what the defense give you, giving the running backs involved in the passing game, using your check downs, just a more complete game you've been seeing these last 2 weeks. That was the silver lining that we're going to need because sometimes the offense is going to need to pick you up.
Got a young Georgia fan on the scene here. Like that red Georgia sweatshirt. What's your name?
Tomlinson Fort.
What'd you think about the game today?
I think it was pretty good.
What was your favorite part?
When, I don't know who it was, but when one of the players got a good hit on one of the UMass players.
Always nice to see that, right? Well, listen, thanks for being on the show today. Really appreciate that. So a lot of good folks having a good time here, and obviously we're talking to Davin Bellamy, and we're going to run through a lot of your calls here, too. So if you can't be with us live at the UGA bookstore, you can still be on the show by clicking the link and joining the show. We'll love to give you the chance to do that here today. And Davin, let's also go back to what one of our commenters was saying just a few moments ago, which is that you got Tech looming this upcoming Friday. Clearly there's an emotional boost for a game like that doesn't exist for a game like this against UMass. And once again, not saying that to excuse this performance, but it is different. I guess I'm a little bit like our previous commenter in that I don't know that today's result necessarily tells me all that much about how Georgia's likely to play against Georgia Tech. Clearly, we saw a better effort against Tennessee. My assumption is that Georgia probably, finds a way to sort of find that extra gear defensively that it could not find today. I don't know that there's anything about this performance that necessarily gives me pause with Tech looming, although certainly when you look at the Tech offense led by coordinator Buster Faulkner, a lot of the things that UMass was doing today did look pretty similar to some of the stuff that perhaps Buster Faulkner wants to do. Maybe that's not a coincidence, but ultimately my guess is next Friday night, with so much on the line for UGA, I certainly hope we'll get a better performance from Georgia. I expect that we probably will. What do you think about that?
I definitely think they'll be up, for next week, just because, everyone is always up, for Georgia Tech. Which, it's kind of hard because I'm going to contradict myself, because you don't want to be like this during the season, especially at the end. You always want to be, peaking right now. And just from being in the program, I know this week, Coach Smart is the guy that cuts the TVs off so you don't look at the rankings. So I don't think he prepared the team in a way of, looking ahead of next week. Georgia Tech is going to come out, and like I said, whatever you put on tape is out there for the world to see. And Georgia Tech is going to come out and try to run the ball like UMass did. If the guys weren't focused today or look past, today, that doesn't excuse 166 yards at half, and the line of scrimmage disparities that there were. So, I mean, it's hard to find a silver lining just because of the running game and just how we're supposed to be dominant, and we just weren't that. But I definitely think they'll be up next week, but I just don't want to see us doing this right now.
Davin, I want to ask you another question for the Georgia defense here in a moment, but before we get to that, we've got more Georgia fans weighing in. By the way, I love the old school dog face logo. You always love that. Remind folks of your name and then tell us what you thought about the game here today.
I'm Tim from Dallas. It's always a great day in Athens on a Saturday when we win.
Yeah.
The main goals were to win and limit the injuries. Hope Christian Miller's going to be all right.
That's right.
Shout out to the seniors that we recognize today. A lot of offensive line guys moving on. We got to replace them. Great to see some of the younger guys. Dwight Phillips was an eyelash from breaking a long one.
Yeah.
Sokovi was in there. You saw Nitro Tuggle in there. You saw a lot. Defense needs to tighten up a little bit. I think we'll be okay with Tech. I think, they're coming with a chip on their shoulder, and I think we can handle them. Minnesota's up 10 on Penn State right now.
How about that?
So, and then, of course, Ole Miss lost, and then you got Indiana lost. So it's...
Yeah, we were talking about that before you joined us. I think the chances of Georgia hosting a home playoff game, which I think has got to be the goal here right now, probably even more so than playing in the SEC Championship, you want that chance to host the home playoff game. With the Indiana loss by the margin that it was, and by Ole Miss being upset by Florida, Georgia's chances of hosting a home playoff game, I believe, have now really gone up.
Well, especially if you saw the Cleveland game Thursday night.
You don't want to be in that snow. That's exactly right.
We'd rather have it in Athens on a nice day. So
that's exactly right.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. Great comments. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. And Davin, as our caller mentions there, our commenter on site mentions there, obviously we'll hold our breath here a little bit about Christian Miller. Very important part of this Georgia defense. He does leave the game with injury. It's the only obvious injury that I know of, but that's a pretty significant. It was a shoulder injury. Georgia officially ruled him out during the game. Pretty clearly, you don't want a name like that to end up on the injury list after, what's essentially almost a meaningless football game against UMass. So we'll obviously be watching really closely here. And I know as a player, you're always probably checking on those teammates to make sure everybody comes out of a game like this unscathed. Perhaps for Georgia on the Miller news, not quite unscathed here today. That's clearly going to be a big report we're watching closely going into next week.
Yeah, he's a tough loss, to the team. Great prospect, for the next level, and just that anchor inside that we need. And I guess that puts in the question of, do you want to play in the SEC championship game? And like I said, this is where you start opening up these can of worms, because you get an extra week of rest to make sure you get those guys back for the playoff. So I definitely think, we may see a little strategy going on to see if we can get some players some extra rest going into the playoff if things continue and we take care of business next week.
No doubt about that. We got a good-looking Lad McConkey jersey here right now. That looks awesome. Great Georgia fan on site with us here at the UGA Bookstore. Tell us your name and kind of what you thought about the game here today.
My name's Sarah. I'm from Savannah, and I listen to you every day.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
It was just great to see the ball get spread around on offense. Carson Beck taking care of the ball. Great to see Gunnar Stockton at the end. I think he's the future for the Dogs. A little concern on defense, but hopefully we'll get that cleaned up before Friday night.
It was a great day for Carson Beck to have such a good day because, as you said, with the Georgia defense having its issues a little bit, I mean, Beck's just throwing darts all over the place, and Nate Frazier obviously gave him a big boost. The Georgia offense playing so well certainly kept this from kind of turning into an even more anxious moment or two because the Georgia offense brought it from the word go, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Nate Frazier was incredible today. I hope he gets player of the game. I'll vote for him on DawgNation.
Oh, that's good to hear. I sort of hope he does too.
Absolutely, he deserves it.
Well, listen, thanks for being a part of the. And by the way, I do believe we'll have some good news in the Nate Frazier front a little bit later on. I'm being told he is our player of the game for today.
Great. I didn't get a chance to vote yet.
Thank you so much for being a part of it. That's good stuff there. Great Georgia fans kind of weighing in on all this. Davin, let me ask another issue about the Georgia defense here for a moment. One of the things that I think, now you're going to pay attention to the rushing yards and all of that. I think there's also an issue right now where Georgia's still trying to figure out its cornerback situation. You know, you saw Daniel Harris get a chance to step in and be a starter today. And listen, body type-wise, I love Harris. Long arms, big frame. It's sort of the perfect modern cornerback, right? That's what they look like these days. But, you know, maybe a couple of tackling issues for Harris. Kind of got lost in coverage a little bit too. Obviously, he's in there because at times Julian Humphreys had his issues as well. It seems like this year, one of those lingering concerns for Georgia, and it was sort of on display today, is Georgia's had a little bit of a hard time figuring out that cornerback spot. And whether it's more of Ellis Robinson, who did get to play some, or really kind of deciding what you have in between Humphrey and Harris, who you pair across from Dalen Everett, who seems to have the other side, you know, kind of stranglehold on that one starting position. It seems like right now, Davin, Georgia's got a lot to figure out when it comes to the cornerback position here right now.
Definitely. You know, when it comes to, you know, your back end, it's so much communication back there, and they have to be on the same page. And that comes with playing with each other for a long period of time and just building that bond. I just think you have so many young guys on the back end, even though they're very talented. And like you mentioned, Harris is one of my favorite, you know, prospects just because, you know, he's, you know, so prototypical. But those guys are just so young that they are going to have highs and they are going to have lows. And I think on the back end, you see a lot of explosive plays happening, not because of a talent issue, but just because of sometimes there may be some miscommunication just because how young those guys are. But when you're playing young players, that's what comes with it. So in reality, you just have to be patient with them and hope that, you know, they're more consistent, you know, with their play.
Got a great Georgia fan on site here with us here at the UGA Bookstore. Looking good. Got the Georgia dog all over the shirt here. By the way, shirts like this available right down there on the first floor here at the UGA Bookstore. The Columbia gear like this, you can find that here at the UGA Bookstore. So make sure you check that out. Remind us your name and tell us what you thought about the game here today.
Mike Neal, and I thought it was a good game. I was very excited to watch Nate Frazier break out. He's definitely one of our future running backs.
Yeah, no doubt. When you see a guy like that, you know, first time all year long, a Georgia running back has gone over 100 yards rushing. That's sort of the best of Georgia football when you get that running back going like that, right?
Oh, yeah, it was awesome.
Well, listen, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate that. And thanks for shouting out Nate Frazier stuff. That's really good stuff. Thank you so much for that. And, Davin, I'll also say this. I don't know if you noticed this. Maybe this sort of speaks to my old school heart here a little bit. But you had Frazier, had the White Sox pulled all the way up. You had a couple of guys on defense, you know, kind of throwing back to sort of a bygone era there. I like the White Sox pulled all the way up. It kind of takes you back to, like, I don't know, 80s era Georgia football, a little bit of Noshawn Marino, who used to do some of that kind of stuff too. I kind of like the high sock look for a few of those Georgia players today. I thought that was kind of a sharp fashion statement.
You know, I'm a little jealous because, you know, Coach Smart has gotten a little soft on the, you know, apparel. Back when I was playing, you could only wear black socks and only have black accessories. So I guess with all the winning they've had lately, you know, they can increase the swag a little bit. But I love the White Sox, man. I would have loved to do the white on white like Harris does. So I'm a big fan of the White Sox also.
Yeah, I would imagine if you had a chance to do that, early days of Kirby Smart may be a little tougher on some of that kind of stuff than perhaps he is now. There's no telling what kind of a fashion statement you would have been looking to make back then.
Right, no doubt.
That's really funny. I love that. That's awesome. Really good stuff. All right, so Davin, I guess to kind of wrap up our portion with you here, Tech looms, perhaps, moving up in those playoff rankings, but clearly plenty to clean up after this afternoon's game. What are your kind of final takeaways here from what Georgia had happen for them on the field against UMass here today, and where this team goes next?
My final takeaway is, of course, the defense has to be better. I'm pretty sure Coach Smart will address that. But one thing, like I said earlier, I do like that the offense was able to, carry us. And that's what you're going to need, because sometimes the offense is not going to be at their best and the defense is going to have to carry them. And I think just the offense picking us up today is showing that they're doing this at the right time. And, of course, these are the games, even though it's tough, this is where you learn how to win. And you got to fight through adversity and just figure out how to win. At the end of the day, no matter who you play, it's just win. And I think games like this will help us when it comes down to the long run.
Davin, great stuff. I appreciate you being a part of our program today. We'll look forward to talking to you this week here on DawgNation Daily. Obviously getting ready for a Black Friday night rivalry game showdown against Georgia Tech. Of course, you played in some big games against Tech, including a revenge game, kind of the cap off of the revenge tour in 2017. So this week on DawgNation Daily, I look forward to hearing more from you about that and kind of how this Georgia team, a little bit different storyline, but it's sort of a similar edge, how Georgia finds that competitive spirit this week. We'll look forward to talking to you about that on DawgNation Daily here this week.
All right, Brent, I'll see you Wednesday. Like always, go Dogs.
Go Dogs indeed. Good stuff there from Davin Bellamy. He's obviously joining us on the show. We want to invite you to do the same thing. Click the link, YouTube, DawgNation.com, Facebook. You can be a part of the show. Also, Georgia fans live on the air here from the UGA Bookstore. We'll give you a chance to do that. As you see these Georgia fans pop by, they've all got their good-looking UGA apparel on, and many of those famous makers like Columbia, you saw that a moment ago, or Vineyard Vines, Tommy Bahama, Johnny O, Peter Millar, the Nike Coaches Gear, 47 brand, all of that here on the first floor at the UGA Bookstore. So you want to look great for what we still think can be a very long playoff run for UGA? You can get that here at the UGA Bookstore. You need that hard-to-buy four-person a Christmas gift for them? Once again, you can find that here at the UGA Bookstore. So come by and see us, or you can shop online, UGABookstore.com. Don't forget, just one more home game left in this 2024 season. Hard to believe it's gone by as quickly as it has. So if you're not here in Athens today, make plans to be here next Friday night. And obviously, if you are leaving the stadium or lingering with your tailgate, come on by and see us. Just a few steps away from you, across the street from the stadium, next to the Tate Student Center. We'd love to see you here as a part of our UGA Bookstore, DawgNation Postgame Show, I should say, live from the UGA Bookstore. Find out more about all the great stuff going on with the UGA Bookstore online at UGABookstore.com. All right, we're going to get more comments. Let me kind of reset things here just for a little bit, though. So I think that there's a lot of ideas that come out of a day like this. On the one hand, I think you love a lot about what you saw from the Georgia offense. Pretty consistent performance from them, and even against the opponent, there's some things that still translate. Carson Beck made some beautiful throws today, for instance, and the accuracy of those throws is not really opponent dependent. He was putting it on the money, throwing some real darts and some real BBs today. I think that is a good thing no matter who you're playing, even if it's a theoretically overmatched opponent like UMass. There's also the issue, though, with the Georgia defense. And, from the word go, Georgia's giving up more than 100 yards rushing the first quarter, more than 200 yards rushing for the entire game. It was a day in which it just seemed like for a while UMass was getting everything that it wanted. And I don't know, in a minute, our tradition here in our DawgNation postgame show is we'll get ready to hear from Georgia coach Kirby Smart, kind of his thoughts on all of this. And I couldn't help but wonder during the game if Kirby Smart after the game will be as colorful as we've heard coaches be in the past when it comes to this sort of thing, expressing some frustration when at least what's supposed to be an overmatched opponent comes in and gives you game effort. For instance, Y'all remember back in 2011 when Georgia Southern ran all over Alabama that day? Back at the time, Georgia Southern was still, I guess, I think they were still FCS foe back then for Alabama. They're just running all over Alabama. And then when Alabama was getting ready for another opponent of a similar stature in 2015, Nick Saban sort of called back on this and in a very colorful way expressed how frustrated he was that they were having such a hard time stopping the running game from Georgia Southern that day. I got to tell you, I couldn't help but think about that and wonder if Kirby Smart will be equally as colorful with his own frustrations about his rush defense today. This is what Saban said about what Georgia Southern did to them when he spoke on the topic back in 2015. See if this sounds like Kirby at the end of today's game.
You all don't remember the Georgia Southern game, do you? I don't think we had a guy on that field that didn't play in the NFL, and about 4 or 5 of them were first-round draft picks. And I think that team won a national championship, but I'm not sure. And they run through our ass like through a tin horn, man, and we could not stop them. Could not stop them. Could not stop them.
So that was Nick Saban, very, very forceful back in 2015. Remembering the Georgia Southern game against 2011, you sort of wonder if Kirby Smart, with his post-game press conference, his remarks about his Georgia defense today, you sort of wonder if he'll choose to be as colorful on all of that. If you're on hold, stay where you are. We're going to get to those calls here coming up. Another Georgia fan on the scene with us here right now. Tell us your name.
My name is Cortland.
Cortland, what do you think about the game here today?
I think it was pretty good. We need this win, and I think we can get at least a few bump spots up after Ole Miss lost to Florida. And hopefully, if Kentucky beats Texas, we might be able to make it to like a top like 7 spot or something.
Yeah. And Cortland, I think that's a really good point. Thanks for being part of the show here today. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good stuff there. And that, I think for me, and we've been kind of saying this, you can talk about what you liked, what you didn't like from the Georgia game, but sometimes the biggest story in college football sort of takes place away from your game. And frankly, Georgia checked a box today. Even if it wasn't beautiful, it got a win. It checked a box. But more importantly, those home playoff games are going to be coveted, far more coveted than a spot in the SEC championship. Lane Kiffin, who now this is not even relevant for him anymore, but Lane Kiffin openly said nobody wants to play in the SEC championship. That's probably true. But everybody would love to have that home playoff game. No one wants to go on the road unless you absolutely have to. So the fact that Georgia was able today to get what it got, I think certainly gives Georgia its chance to maybe be at home for the playoff, maybe play in friendly confines, and avoid some of that cold weather that the Big Ten folks are hoping they have to get the chance to inflict on it. So we're going to talk about all of that live here at the UGA Bookstore. Your calls here, too. In fact, let's go out to the phones here right now. Joseph and Griffin. Joseph, you're next up here today on our DawgNation Postgame show. Joseph, how about them Dogs? Not perfect. Georgia does win and maybe set to move up in the college football playoff rankings. What'd you think about it, Joseph?
Oh, I think it was great, B.A. Go Dogs. We had a good game today. Defense line, though, it was kind of sucking there. Like Nick Saban said, they were running the ball up and down the road on us when he was comparing Alabama. So we got to get that fixed against Tech. They kept talking smack. I was on your show the other day when Tech was on there talking smack. So I hope Coach paid that.
Yeah, Joseph, I think we had a bad signal there with you at the end, but I think everybody heard what you're saying. Obviously, for Georgia, because of the stuff that Tech's been saying, because of the fact that all of a sudden they're feeling pretty confident, I think you may see an extra level of motivation for Georgia for that game. By the time we get to next Friday night, whatever happened against UMass, probably justifiably so, ends up being a little bit of a distant memory. Let's get one more call here for right now before we talk to some folks here live at the UGA Bookstore. G is in Philly. You're next up here on the DawgNation Postgame show. G, how about them Dogs? What'd you think about today?
Yeah, how about them Dogs? Happy early Thanksgiving, BA. Look, offensively, they played great, and I think that offensive line is also a story. Finally letting the run game go, and Carson Beck 4 touchdowns in the first half. So they look great, obviously much more talented, so it shouldn't have been close. But that defensive unit really has to kind of tackle and up the physicality. I think it is human nature after that Tennessee game to look ahead of Georgia Tech and take maybe UMass not as seriously. But at the same time, I'm looking ahead of Georgia Tech, too. If they win that, there's going to be some physical games coming up. So got to tackle and can't let these chunk plays happen.
No, I don't. I agree with you 100% on that, Gene. I appreciate the phone call. Always really good stuff from you. Yeah, the kinds of big chunk plays that Georgia gave up on the ground, if you're talking about a sort of tightly contested, closely, competition of a college football playoff game, big rushing plays like that could change the game and ultimately cost Georgia the game. So clearly, against better competition moving forward, Georgia, of course, has to play much better than it did today. I think you say that exactly right. I think you also bring a pretty good point about the motivational impact of a game like today, and we're going to talk more about that here coming up in a moment. More Georgia fans, though, live on the scene. National champs back in 2021. Great-looking sweatshirt and great-looking pair of kids here on hand there, too. Tell us your name.
I'm Chef Jay Bowen from
YouTube. Yeah, Chef Jay Bowen is a part of our show all the time. I always call him Chief Jay because I can't read, but Chef Jay Bowen. So are you really a chef?
Yes.
That's awesome.
I have the soda fountain and North Georgia Catering Company up in Free Plug, up in Rabun County.
Fantastic. Well, what a cool thing to do. Well, Chef, we always appreciate your comments. You're always so great as part of our YouTube comment section. How'd you feel about the game here today?
Really liked Frazier's running. Saw some good physical stuff. Love to see the defense try to tackle a little bit better. It was kind of tough in the beginning.
Probably needs to be, right?
It needs to be, but especially going forward. But this was their first game.
Did you have a good time? What's your name?
Hopeful.
So this is the first game you've ever been to, right? What was your favorite part of the whole day?
My dad taken me to this game, and I loved it.
Fantastic. Well, let me ask you this. Since your dad's a chef, step over here, so if you don't mind stepping over a little closer to the folks and see you. If your dad's a chef, is he feeding you some good food?
Yes. He actually has. He's. I'm trying to think. He's at like this wooded area that sells stuff.
Fantastic.
And he's just open to the public, and he can just make food. And when it's lunch breaks, he gets us some food.
Well, that's fantastic. Did you enjoy the game today, too?
Yes, I did.
Well, girls, I appreciate you being a part of the show. And Chef Jay, I appreciate your comments. Always so good. I hope you enjoy a happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for being here today.
You too. Thank you, sir.
Good stuff there from our buddy Chef Jay Bowen, a big part of our YouTube comment section. Always doing a great job. Now, I want to go back to something we were talking about a little earlier, which is, as one of our commenters mentioned, I forget if it was a caller or someone live on site here at the UGA bookstore. The truth is, I think we live in a day and age now where a lot of coaches have expertise on the right game plan. They have expertise on how to teach the right technique. That's just sort of the basic coaching 101, and most coaches are going to succeed in that. The honest truth is, and I don't know what you do about this, there may be nothing you can do about this. I just don't know that very many coaches have figured out a way to get their guys to play well and play at a consistent level for 12 football games. I just don't know that anyone's figured that out. Even like the best of Georgia football. I'm talking about, think about a 2022 team that goes undefeated, essentially doesn't really play close football games. Close against Missouri, close against Ohio State. Everything other than that was like double digits, right? I mean, at least a double-digit margin of victory for Georgia that season, and yet there were still a lot of games that, relative to expectations, relative to what you thought about the opponent, even in those games, Georgia, didn't play particularly well. That motivation is just a tricky thing. In fact, we played the Nick Saban clip a moment ago. There's something to keep in mind, that Saban kind of essentially mocking his team for not being able to stop Georgia Southern. There's something pretty significant about the year in which that took place. That's 2011. What did Alabama also do in 2011? They won the national championship. So this was a team that was good enough to beat theoretically anybody, and yet against Georgia Southern that day, they could not really stop the run. So once again, we're not trying to excuse away what Georgia did defensively, but in terms of the significant things that happened in this season, I don't rank a very bad effort defensively for Georgia very high on that list. I think that what's going to come next is more important. I think the fact that after a grueling gauntlet of a schedule, the fact that Georgia perhaps has a chance to get a home playoff game if results continue to kind of work out in Georgia's favor, and by the way, if Georgia also wins next Friday night, I think all of that's what really matters. And whatever did or didn't happen against UMass, the fact that more points were scored, more yards were compiled by UMass, will end up going into the dustbin of Georgia history, and folks can kind of question how come this kind of stuff seems to happen. But in terms of its actual significance for Georgia, I'm just not sure it's very high. So if you're watching live, you can click the link, be a part of the show, We will also look forward to getting Kaylee Mansell coming up in a little bit. Kaylee, of course, getting a chance to talk to the UMass interim coach. Obviously, a tough first game for him after the firing of Don Brown, challenging scenario, but a guy that also kind of found a way to carve out some success against Georgia. What did they say before they head back up to Amherst, Massachusetts? She will tell us about all of that here coming up in just a couple of moments. So while we have time here as well, as a lot of folks keep saying, Nate Frazier and bringing up that name, let's go ahead and do what one of our viewers and people live on site with us was hoping would be true. Let's go ahead and give out Nate Frazier as our player of the game here today, brought to you by our friends at ServPro. Obviously, historic day for Frazier in that he is the first guy this season to go over 100 yards rushing for Georgia, doing that as a freshman. Also added significance here, and doing that with the lingering injury of Trevor Etienne being a story for this team, that also matters too. So Frazier perhaps coming into his own at the right time, shaking off the turnover issue that obviously hurt Georgia at Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. So big day here for Nate Frazier. A lot to like about that if you're a Georgia fan. We'll make him our player of the game, courtesy of ServPro. And, of course, for Georgia, a little bit of a mess to clean up on at least one side of the ball here today. But if you get your own mess to clean up, fire damage, water intrusion, our friends from ServPro want to get all that cleaned up for you, put it back together like it never even happened. The restoration specialists of ServPro want to do that for you. So you can find them online, servpro.com, S-E-R-V, servpro.com. Got a fire breaks out or a water pipe burst or something like that, the huge mess, our friends from ServPro will get it put back together for you like it never even happened. ServPro.com for more on that. S-E-R-V, ServPro.com. And by the way, quite a stat line for Frazier in the day, 136 yards, 3 touchdowns, all of that coming on 21 carries. So big performance from Frazier. Also added a catch as well for 11 yards today. So nice performance from him. Now, let's run through a couple of other things here for a moment while we're also kind of cataloging everything that happens for Georgia today. And by the way, it's been a long time since on our DawgNation Postgame show we've done sort of the old school comments. We used to read them a lot. We may read a few comments on today's show. We'll have some fun doing that. Hope to hear from Kirby Smart. We can kind of compare what Kirby says about his rush defense to what Saban said in the clip that we just played. Maybe Carson Beck on the way here too. So we'll cover all of that. So a couple of the notes here for a moment. Gunnar Stockton does get into the game today, but does not get into the game until 9:57 to go in the game. So I think there was some stuff to like. From the honest truth is I'm also kind of coming over to the show as Gunnar gets in, so I may not have the best overall evaluation of Gunnar because I didn't see as much of it. I'm getting ready for the show at that time, but it's nice that he got some playing time. I think if you want to speak to maybe what the game could have been and kind of what it wasn't, the fact that Gunnar does not get that playing time until 9:57 to go in the game probably kind of tells you this was not quite the day that Georgia was hoping for, did not get him in, and it kind of bumps into something that Kirby also talked about some last week, which is just kind of a weird year for Georgia, much tougher schedule, some of those challenges, some of the backups just maybe have not played as much for Georgia as they would have played in recent years. Perhaps Gunnar Stockton getting in today's game as late as he did, another example of that. It's also kind of interesting, speaking of that, in the fourth quarter when Georgia was sort of trying to put this game away, Georgia chose to go for it on fourth down, didn't get it. Beck took a pretty big shot there at that time. Now, ultimately, I think that Carson's probably fine. I had my binoculars out, and I was watching him on the sideline trying to see how he looked. Seemed like he's probably fine, but it's sort of another example of, because Georgia didn't take care of its business and handle itself early, you run into a situation where Beck has to stay in the game longer, takes a big shot, takes a big hit. I think he's probably fine, but it's the sort of hit that Beck probably does not have to take if Georgia's more convincingly and, in control of the game at that time. So that is the story here. We'll get more of your comments. You want to join us via phone, you can do that. We're going to hear from Kaylee Mansell. We'll hear from Kirby Smart. We have a lot more fun to come here from the UGA bookstore, just really one of our final 2 times to be here this season. So that is all what's going on. Back to the conversation. We are going to pause, though, for a quick 60-second break. We're going to thank a couple of sponsors for being a part of what we're doing here, and then we'll talk more about this Georgia win, what we saw from it, and why a couple of results outside of Athens perhaps have helped UGA today. So quick 60-second break to thank a couple sponsors. We're right back to it 1 minute from now on our DawgNation Postgame Show.
Big games deserve big meals, so let ServPro make it happen. It's friendly Tex-Mex, served fresh every day. ServPro's catering can handle the crowd, so it's perfect for your tailgate or watch party. Order online, pickup, or delivery. ServPro's is Georgia grown with over 30 locations throughout the state, bringing you fresh Mex, bowls, burritos, tacos, and more, with over 25 fresh toppings, customizable, just the way you like it. So find a location near you at servpros.com. That's servpros.com.
When you've got to haul, when you've got to mow, when you've got to feed, whatever you've got to do, whatever you've got to do, you've got to get a John Deere. Whether you're working at home or on the farm, the team at Lassiter Tractor Company can help you find the right product for you. Find your local dealer at LassiterEQ.com.
DawgNation Postgame is sponsored by R.S. Andrews, Kroger, Pella Windows and Doors, and the UGA Bookstore.
Great to have you back here at the DawgNation Postgame Show, live here at the UGA Bookstore. Georgia gets a win against UMass, gets some help from an Ole Miss loss at the hands of Florida. Indiana beaten somewhat convincingly against Ohio State. Georgia might be moving up the playoff rankings, but obviously also moving on with UMass with some stuff to clean up on the defensive side of the ball. Kaylee Mansell had a chance to talk to this interim coaching staff from UMass here a moment ago. I'm imagining they're leaving Athens. Obviously, they knew they had no chance to win the game, but leaving Athens maybe feeling like they did a few things well today.
Yeah, you can definitely see that he was proud of his team. He reiterated that, and one of the things that he talked about was the transition from firing their head coach to him becoming interim head coach, how the team was down, and you question the certainty of the program moving forward. So he was proud of his team for fighting through the adversity. It's really a short press conference. They got him out of there. The most interesting thing that happened is Rodrigo Blankenship walked through right before the coach came on, and he goes, "Guys, this is the only time I'm going to say this, but go Gators."
So Rodrigo understands the value of that win for Florida against Ole Miss. Ole Miss team that we saw looked really good when they beat Georgia a couple of weeks ago, but now because of that third loss, you have to assume, of course nothing's a given this day and age, but you have to assume that Ole Miss is now eliminated in the college football playoff, and so Rodrigo knows that Ole Miss moving out means Georgia's moving up, and I'm telling you right now, there is a huge difference between playing one of these games at home and having to go on the road. So I do believe that the biggest headline involving Georgia today does not involve the game that Georgia played. It involves the chance, as Rodrigo Blankenship points out, that Georgia could be moving on up in these playoff rankings. And if you can get into that top 8, you got to feel really good about yourself.
Yeah, Lane Kiffin really found a way to Lane Kiffin that game. But any college football fan that's been watching can see that the biggest winner of today is Tennessee.
Yeah, so Tennessee now back into that playoff conversation too. And honestly, I'm no Vol fan, of course, but if they do get to 10-2 with a win against Alabama, one of their 2 losses coming to the hands of Georgia. Of course, the Arkansas loss doesn't look great, but the Georgia loss on the road, that's nothing to really apologize for. It's kind of weird to me that coming into today, they weren't given more consideration for the playoff. I mean, it just seems like there's a hard ceiling and a cap on the SEC only getting 4 playoff teams right now. So I don't like Tennessee, but I did feel like they had a more convincing playoff argument they were being given credit for. And you're right, because that Ole Miss loss, they are now solidly back in that playoff conversation again.
I just am curious to see what's going to end up happening with Indiana. I was surprised that Ryan Day did that QB sneak to put them up one more score. The Big Ten had to hate that, but how does that affect everyone else? I mean, you and I could easily make the argument that only 3 Big Ten teams deserve to get in when there could be, at this point, 5 or 6 if you want to throw South Carolina in their SEC teams that deserve to be in there. So I'm curious to see what the committee does. I think it's going to tell us a lot, but now it seems like if Georgia can get past Georgia Tech, they're a lock, and it looks like Tennessee might be in too.
So I want to ask you something else here for a moment. Obviously today, atmosphere pales in comparison to what it was last week against Tennessee, and clearly there were a lot of empty seats where the students would normally sit up at the 300 level. But pushing that aside for a moment, I actually thought for the most part the crowd was okay today. And like I said, it's not raucous like it was last week, but most of the non-student areas were really full. And there are a couple of moments maybe where Georgia fans kind of wish they didn't have to make noise on when Georgia was on defense, didn't have to get a stop from UMass. But late in this game, I thought the fans kind of got into it a couple of times here. I really didn't think, all things considered, a little bit colder, not a great opponent, big letdown, kind of in between two pretty big games for Georgia. All in all, I actually thought the Georgia crowd was okay today.
I definitely thought so, too. I think after Kirby Smart called out fans earlier this year, I mean, they took that personally. This is a coach and a program that's given you so much excitement, so many wins and 2 national championships. Like, if Kirby Smart's going to ask you to do something, you've got to do it in return. And, I mean, I was surprised at it today because this is a weird game, squished in the middle of 2 really, really important games. But the crowd still delivered. The students up in the top section, we won't talk about them at this point. Just let somebody else have their seat.
But even in defense of them, if you're out of school and you're going home for Thanksgiving, I mean, it's like you can go be with your high school friends, or you can go get some home cooking from mama, or you can stay here and go to the UMass game. I mean, listen, I was a little critical of some of the students a little earlier this season, I think, for a couple of things. I can't be that mad at you if you went back home for Thanksgiving break and didn't come to the UMass game. I don't think I can be that mad about that.
In no way am I trying to age you by saying this because you know I love you, but as someone who was a student a little bit more recently than you, nobody goes home for Thanksgiving the day after Thanksgiving break starts. Like, you don't go home till Monday or Tuesday unless you're one of these out-of-state kids, but the majority of kids that attend the University of Georgia are in-state kids, and most kids don't.
So you think they're in town, they just want to come to the game? Well, that's a little different story.
Or they're watching the game downtown, or maybe they just didn't want to get up early, probably had too wild of a Friday night, but I mean, all that aside, I'm with you. I think that the crowd delivered today in a day where, I mean, typically you wouldn't, especially this late in the season, weird game. So I'm with you. I think they did a great job, but that's just my opinion on the students at the top.
All right, good stuff, Kaylee. Appreciate that. We always love your coverage here on game days. Of course, you can watch her on the Game Day pregame show live from Jittery Joe's every game day morning, including next Friday. Kaylee will be there, too. No, it's not always in the morning. It's always 2 hours before game time, so 5:30 next week before Georgia and Georgia Tech. So we'll have more of your thoughts here coming up, but the thoughts that you probably care the most about are those from Georgia coach Kirby Smart. Now, we played a clip earlier of a very fiery Nick Saban when his team didn't do a very good job stopping the run against a lesser opponent. Does Kirby Smart get that animated here right now? Let's listen to some of his post-game press conference. We'll find that out here as we continue to be live from the UGA bookstore.
Yeah, I thought it was a great turnout for our guys. I was honored to have the senior class get recognized today. That's always a very emotional moment for them and their families. I remember mine like it was yesterday. And that class, man, I mean, it's hard to put into words or numbers what they've done. I tell people all the time, there's a 6-year group, Dan and Truss. There's a 5-year group, which is crowded. I don't even know. You guys know. Then there's a 4-year group. So we're honoring the 4-year group because the 4-year group's one that set the record. But that group that was here 6 years, Truss and Dan, I mean, we say 51 wins. They were part of more than that. And they've set a standard here. And if you make it 6 and 5 years in our program, you're a tough dude. And I appreciate those seniors, their families. I mean, the guys that never get their name called and go out there and work. Colin Drake, quarterback. I mean, this guy has gone live and been our running quarterback all year and taking shots. And I'm glad he got to get in the game at the end there. And a lot of other guys that don't get to play. I was really proud of those guys and what they did. Didn't play real well defensively, obviously. Disappointing there. Probably the best thing we need for a wake-up call. Played really well offensively, but we overmatched our opponent. So with that, I'll open it up. No, I don't know that it was just tackling. We did not tackle well, but it was more than just tackling. It was, like I hate to say it, I just don't think that our guys were ready to play and energized to play as their guys were. Their guys wanted it more than us. And it's very rare that I could sit up here and say that. Like, they were playing harder. They were moving us. They were playing physical. They had some nice RPOs and some nice play designs, but it wasn't about that. It was, I want to, like desire. That's the biggest thing.
Unusual in that you got a chance to see Tech play the other night. Just your thoughts as you get ready for them and what they're going to bring in here with that kind of two-quarterback thing.
Yeah, I didn't get. I mean, I got to see some of the game. We'll be working on ourselves first and clean that up, and then start getting ready for those guys. I mean, we break down their tape each and every week they play. We break down everybody we play. So, during the off week, we got to look at them a little bit and see them, and then some of the guys got to see them Thursday night because we get through a little bit earlier. But we're moving on to them now. They got a great program, great team. They're extremely physical. They run the ball well. They run with the quarterback well, and we got to play better.
What are the challenges and differences in the short week?
You hear Kirby Smart there with – so you hear Kirby Smart there with the phrase that's going to, I think, stick out for a lot of people. We just got to play better. Now, I didn't expect Kirby to be quite as fiery as Saban was in the tin horn rant that we heard a little earlier, but noticeably pretty calm about that and kind of matter of fact about what UMass was able to do and his challenge to his team to improve from what it showed today on the defense side of the ball. The truth is, and look, I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but at the same time, I also have to be honest. I assume that Georgia probably will play better against Georgia Tech. Now, this is a team all year long that has certainly been imperfect and has flirted with disaster on either side of the ball at various moments. So I am certainly not here to tell you that everything's going to be easy for Georgia the rest of the way, but I just don't put a lot of significance into a bad game against UMass. The next time Georgia plays badly, the truth is its season very well may come to an end. But today, it's probably more about checking the box and getting ready to move on, and that is what Georgia was able to do. It's also an outstanding day for the Georgia offense. Carson Beck was a big part of that. Coming up in a moment, we'll get our chance to hear from Carson on that. Let's also, as we kind of roll into that, give you a chance to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. A couple of our great DawgNation cruisers are here with us here right now at the UGA bookstore. So it's always kind of nice to have that fellowship with folks we've had a good time with on the cruise ship, and then have them come over and see us here at the UGA bookstore. That's always a great thing. So let me give you some scores here, cruise around the SEC for some games in progress, starting outside the SEC, where Arizona State's up halftime over BYU 21-3. So BYU's life as a playoff contender could be quickly coming to an end. Similar situation for another Big 12 team, Colorado, who's been very hot as of late, but arguably the hottest team in the country may have been Kansas. And right now, with 1:19 to go in the second quarter, Kansas leads Colorado 20-14. There's also some social media video out there right now of a very big hit that Shedeur Sanders took a little earlier. I don't know what his situation is, but obviously Colorado is losing here right now. Keep in mind that it's at least mathematically possible that if Boise State keeps winning, and if somehow Army were to upset Notre Dame and then go on to win the AAC, the playoff contract only calls for the 5 highest-rated conference champions to make the playoff. It doesn't guarantee anything to the Power 4 here. If the group of 5 teams keep winning, and if the Big 12, doesn't sort of bounce back here a bit, we could see a situation where it's at least possible that the Big 12 champions actually excluded from the playoff, and 2 group of 5 teams could benefit from that, but obviously a long way to go before you have to worry about that. Nearing the end of the first half there in Minneapolis, where Minnesota has a 17-10 win over lead, I should say, 17-10 lead over Penn State right now. So we've already seen an upset today. Ole Miss going down to the hands of Florida, and Minnesota trying to hang with Penn State right now, in fact, having that lead. It's 14-7 nearing the end of the second quarter, with Texas on top of Kentucky here right now. Texas looking for wins wherever it can get them. Their schedule's been somewhat criticized. You've got Missouri on top of Mississippi State at the end of the first quarter, 14-10, that situation. And, of course, earlier today, the 2 big results, Ohio State beat Indiana. A couple of big plays on special teams. A Caleb Downs punt return, a miscue on a would-be Indiana punt, sort of end up help building the margin there. And the Hoosiers don't really get what they were hoping for, which was, a super close call. Obviously, this game was never really in doubt. And you kind of wonder, did Indiana do enough going on the road, losing to Ohio State, never seriously threatening? If that's all it takes to get Indiana in the college football playoff, then I don't think we can include anything other than the regular season for the Big Ten anyway has definitely been watered down if that is the case. Florida upsets Ole Miss. Bad day for Rebels quarterback Jackson Dart, and a ruinous day for Ole Miss playoff chances. They were almost in the clubhouse. They were almost there. I mean, obviously, after the game against Georgia, even someone like me who's been pretty skeptical of Lane Kiffin over the years, even I'm giving him his flowers. But ultimately, with prosperity just a couple of inches away, Ole Miss falls short again, as the story has been for Lane Kiffin in his era as Rebels coach. Tennessee blows out UTEP 56-0. Vols probably moving up those playoff rankings here this week with a chance to actually be in the field for them, thanks to the good fortune of an Ole Miss loss. Later on tonight's Notre Dame and Army, watching that closely. Bama and Oklahoma, Auburn and Texas A&M, I think, is also a pretty fun game too. So a lot of interesting games with playoff implications taking place right now and still to come. And of course, that's cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Just wave goodbye to some folks from our Dog Nation cruise who are here on the scene with us. And, of course, that's always a special part about our Dog Nation cruise. You get to know folks. You connect with them. And when you see them in Athens or throughout the year, you always have those special memories that you shared on board a cruise ship, like Utopia of the Seas, the one we're going to be on here this April. So we'd love for you to be a part of our Dog Nation cruise if you've never done so before, or if you're coming back again, we're glad to have you coming back there too. So please reach out to Jessica Slater, and phone number's on the screen. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. She would love to have you be a big part of our Dog Nation cruise in April of 2025 as we sail out of Port Canaveral, closest cruise port to the Atlanta area where many of us live in the state of Georgia, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay. By the way, speaking of the Bahamas, Georgia basketball gave it a game effort in the Bahamas against Marquette for a while today before ultimately falling short. But the point is, we'd love to have you on our Dog Nation cruise, to go to Perfect Day, Coco Cay, and to have fun with that. So check all of that out with Jessica Slater, cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And before we get ready to say goodbye to you here today, as promised, the Georgia quarterback Carson Beck helped power a Georgia offense that over the course of the last two games, and one game that really mattered, today's game that probably didn't matter quite as much, but either way, for 8 consecutive quarters now, this Georgia offense probably playing as consistently as it has all season long. What did Carson think about all of that? He spoke to reporters just a moment ago.
Talk about the offense in these last 2 games. Even despite you guys missing a lot of players, y'all have seem to be kind of getting in a gear right now. Kind of what's been the key?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, just the execution. Just taking it one play at a time, first down, second down, third down. Once we get to the red zone, it's kind of different. Just to be able to punch it in and score touchdowns is something that, we've been able to do the past 2 games. I thought today we started out really fast and then just executed on all levels, like I said.
297 4 tuds for your senior day game. First of all, what was it like running out? I know we talked about it earlier this week, but what were the emotions like, and then just being able to play so well?
Yeah, I mean, anytime we get to play at home, it's always a lot of fun. Knowing that, there's not too many opportunities left when it comes to playing at home. Obviously, we might be able to earn that. We don't know what that looks like 1 week at a time. We don't want to look too far ahead. But for right now, last guaranteed home game is next week. So it's always fun to have that opportunity and, get to go out there and play with the guys.
Carson, how are you feeling at the end of that game? Like you took a shot on that last play?
I was hurting a little bit. Body's hurting for sure. It's football, so, I don't have a black jersey on out there like I do in practice. But no, I'm good. I was just hurting a little bit, but, it is what it is. It's football, so keep it pushing.
Carson, I know you guys still have one home game left, but what will you...
So a couple of interesting things there from Carson Beck. You can go to the Dog Nation YouTube page and see the rest of the Carson Beck interview, and I hope you will do that. Beck does acknowledge on that big shot that he took in the fourth quarter that he was a little hurt. In fact, you could watch him walking off the field, especially if you're in the stadium. You saw that. A little slow moving off, but I had my binoculars out and I sort of followed him all the way to the bench. He never got any kind of like medical treatment or anything like that. It just hurts. Sometimes football just hurts, as he said, and it seems like that's all that it was. He also says we only have one guaranteed home game left, and the word guaranteed is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. And I don't know. I'm sort of excited about this. I sort of feel like we've never had a show like this where we're talking about the possibility of next week not being the last home game that Georgia plays, that we could perhaps be back in Athens for a reason other than a championship celebration, that if Georgia plays well enough, there's still a chance that Georgia could still get that chance to play in this venue in December. And what a thing that would be, what a moment that would be, and Carson Beck sort of alludes to that with that statement that he makes here right there. We got some Georgia fans on hand. You want to be a part of the show here? We're gonna get ready to wrap things up here in just a little bit. A lot of Georgia fans on hand here. Come over. Tell folks your name.
Alan Bourne.
Alan, good to have you here. What did you think about the game here today?
I thought it was great. I had some questions about it, but then I thought the outcome was good.
The outcome worked out pretty well, and we just heard Carson Beck saying, hey, listen, or at least hinting in the idea that maybe Georgia's talking about a playoff game here in Athens. As long as he can keep taking care of its business, that'd be a lot of fun, wouldn't it?
It would be absolutely a great thing.
Well, listen, Alan, thanks for being part of the show. Appreciate that.
Thank
Great
you.
stuff there for sure. Good to see Georgia fans here and being a part of the show. Good stuff from everybody here. We're going to get ready to wrap it up at the UGA bookstore and obviously get excited about a big Thanksgiving week coming up where Georgia's getting ready for Georgia Tech and so much fun that is on the horizon as long as these dogs keep taking care of their business. I'll give you one final thought here, too. CK Emmett fan, our YouTube comment section, was asking you about Georgia and its chances for the SEC championship, something that a lot of folks have said, well, maybe we're not quite so sure Georgia necessarily wants to do. But it is still a possibility, and I believe I have this right. And if I don't have it right, y'all jump in and correct me in the comments. But I believe if Auburn were to beat Texas A&M, but then if Texas A&M were to beat Texas A&M were to beat Texas, that would qualify Georgia for the SEC championship. Or if Alabama were to lose to either Oklahoma or Auburn, that would put Georgia in the SEC championship. So it's one of those years which maybe the most Georgia thing ever would be for Georgia to make the SEC championship in a year in which Georgia fans probably don't want to make the SEC championship, but it doesn't take some huge leap to get Georgia there. You need an Auburn win against either A&M or Alabama, a Texas lost to A&M, any of those situations, an Alabama loss of any kind, or Auburn beating A&M and then A&M beating Texas, either of those two scenarios playing out might get Georgia into the SEC championship. So that's one of those things that's still out there and one of the reasons why we'll be watching all of these results so closely at the conclusion of this weekend and then heading towards that Thanksgiving weekend too, as we think of it as rivalry week around college football. So I've mentioned a couple of times the DawgNation YouTube page. You want to see the full Kirby Smart press conference, you can see that there. You want to see the full Carson Beck press conference and the remarks from other Georgia players, you can see that too. Also throughout the week, DawgNation Daily, looking forward to talking plenty more about what's next for Georgia in its playoff chase and the rivalry game against Georgia Tech. And, of course, reading all the stories at DawgNation.com, more insight for what was a Georgia win against UMass. Probably not perfect, but at least it's over. And now Georgia can look ahead to the ones that truly matter, rivalry game to conclude the regular season, and then whatever comes after that. Come by and see us next week here at the UGA Bookstore. It'll be Friday night. Don't forget that, Black Friday night. What a special atmosphere it has the potential to be. So we'll see you there for that. Back here again very soon on our DawgNation Postgame Show. Thanks for being with us, everybody.